Hello and welcome to Shredder Zoo. Today we're taking a closer look at an iconic animal whose fossils represent a transitional form between birds and dinosaurs. This is the Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx lived in the late Jurassic around 150 million years ago in what is now southern Germany, during a time when Europe was an archipelago of islands in the shallow warm tropical sea, much closer to the equator than it is now. Over the years, 12 body fossil specimens of Archaeopteryx and a feather that may belong to it have been found. All of the fossils come from the limestone deposits quarried for centuries near Solnhofen, Germany. Here the fossils of all kinds of creatures from ammonites to fish and even pterosaurs have been found. But there was one fossil in particular that caught the eye of Hermann von Meyer, the fossil of a feather. This discovery took place in 1861 when the scientific field of paleontology was still in its infancy. The idea of extinct animals that roamed the land before man had only been properly realised in the early 19th century. The first pterosaur, Pterodactylus, had been named in 1809, and the first dinosaur, Megalosaurus, in 1824, and Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species had only just been published a couple of years earlier in 1859. The truly radical thing about the discovery of this single feather impression was that it came from a Jurassic Age deposit, a fact that shook the then relatively new theory that birds did not appear until the Eocene after the dinosaurs had disappeared. From this one feather, von Meyer named the new genus of Archaeopteryx. But naming a new genus of bird by only a feather means that it is hard to accurately reconstruct the animal. But in the same year a new fossil was found at Solnhofen, and this time it was a partial skeleton. This fossil is now known as the London Specimen and was first given to local physician Carl Haberlein in return for medical services. He then sold it for £700, a huge sum of money, to the Natural History Museum in London where it remains. Missing only the head and neck, the London Specimen gave the first true glimpse of what Archaeopteryx actually looked like. However, the skeletal remains were not those of a bird that we would recognise today. The most obvious difference was the tail, long and lizard-like. But there were also two free claws on each wing. This came as a bit of a shock for those who were expecting Archaeopteryx to actually look more like a bird. But for the evolutionists, the find was a dream come true. Evolutionary theory back in the 19th century was still a very new idea, one that many naturalists considered to be complete nonsense. To the evolutionists, however, the London Specimen was proof that the birds did not just magically appear and that their origins could be found within the reptiles. Another specimen was discovered around 1874 or 1875 by a farmer. He sold this precious fossil for the money to buy a cow in 1876. It eventually found its way to the Humboldt Museum, where it is now displayed. It is known as the Berlin Specimen, and is probably the most famous Archaeopteryx fossil, and is also the most complete. This was the first specimen to include the head, and again things were not as expected. The skull seen here was also more reptile-like, and the jaws still had conical teeth within them. Several more specimens have been found, including the smallest individual found in 1951. It was originally thought to be a specimen of the dinosaur Compsognathus. I mentioned this in my video on the Compy a few weeks ago. Archaeopteryx was roughly the size of a raven, with broad wings that were rounded at the ends and a long tail compared to its body length. It could reach up to 500mm, that's about 20 inches in body length, with an estimated mass of 0.8 to 1 kg, that's about 1.8 to 2.2 pounds. Archaeopteryx feathers were very similar in structure to modern-day bird feathers. Despite the presence of numerous avian features, Archaeopteryx had many non-avian theropod dinosaur characteristics. Unlike modern birds, Archaeopteryx had small teeth, as well as a long, bony tail, features which Archaeopteryx shared with other dinosaurs of the time. Various specimens of Archaeopteryx showed that it had flight and tail feathers. The well-preserved Berlin specimen showed the animal also had body plumage that included well-developed trouser feathers on the legs. His body plumage was down-like and fluffy. Based on his wings and feathers, scientists believe Archaeopteryx likely had some aerodynamic abilities. The contour feathers in the wing and on the side of the tails of Archaeopteryx have an asymmetric shape, which is usually related to a higher aerodynamic performance. Thus it is very likely that Archaeopteryx could fly, but it's hard to judge if it was a flapper or a glider. Archaeopteryx had a primitive shoulder girdle that likely limited its flapping abilities. It lacked a reverse toe, which means that Archaeopteryx could not grip hold of perches like modern birds. It had a hyperextensible second toe with a claw, and 2 or 3 claws on the wings. Now this may indicate that Archaeopteryx were trunk climbers, climbing to the trees instead of flying to them, but possibly jumping off and gliding from tree to tree. Again, this hints at the evolution in flight for birds, in that adaptations for gliding from tree to tree leads to further adaptations for extended gliding ranges until full-powered flapping flight developed. As mentioned before, Archaeopteryx lived in an island habitat. Many of the islands seem to have been quite arid, with some growths of conifers. There were not a lot of opportunities for the Archaeopteryx to climb up high, but then they might not have had to. The island plants might have been large enough to provide cover and possibly be used as gliding platforms. We still have much to learn about these ancient island ecosystems, and a picture of their reconstructions might change dramatically with future discoveries. The structure of the foot being more suited to ground locomotion than grasping, coupled with the still relatively long legs, have been taken by some as signs that the Archaeopteryx may have spent their time on the ground instead of in the air. It may be the Archaeopteryx climbed up into shrubs and small trees for nighttime protection from potential predators. Analysis of the scleral rings of the Archaeopteryx shows that they match the diurnal birds, which means that the Archaeopteryx would have only been active during the day. Well, that's all I have for you this week. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video and you've learned something new. If you did, please let me know by leaving a like and a comment down below. Make sure you subscribe and please come back next time for more talks here at Shredder Zoo. Goodbye.